I'll get back to you on that. Paige, can you hear me? Can you see me? Sass. Brooks updating the budget. She'll be on shortly, and I don't know where Kyle is. Barry is going all the way to the other side of the newsroom. Bum, 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 bum. Paige, do you know the words to the OSU fight song? Because Adam Kemp does not.
I know that.
Got one. You and Ryan got it.
Everybody has to sing there on the first. I know the alma mater. I'm singing way too much, but to that ride song, I think that's the lyrics. And there's also lyrics to the cheat. Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. How do you feel about the OSU USO switch up? What the student section does.
They still do it?
Yeah.
Does the flag still do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
So the OSU grad
We'll get closer, like that today.
Me, Ryan, Kyle.
Being what it should be.
Yeah.
It is. Random small things.
What do you expect from him going into this game, and how do you anticipate the fans will react to him and how he'll perform?
I think he's going to do pretty well. He's a hot streak recently. He started out the year kind of rocky. And we've also seen in the past that he hasn't done so well in these super charged up emotional games. But I think and mature enough that he's not going to have a huge problem with that this week. I think the fans, I know a couple of years ago I wasn't there, but when he drove himself down as a walk-on, or when he had his sitting out year for transfer stuff, he had to be like escorted to his car by Bob Stoops' security personnel people. So I don't think it's going to be that bad this time. I'm hoping that they find something else creative to throw other than tortillas.
Barry, you've written about how Baker Mayfield has sort of been up and down this season. He got off to a slow start, and he's sort of turned it around over the last couple of games. What can a good, solid performance back in Lubbock do for him for the rest of this season moving forward?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if he needs anything for his season. I mean, Baker Mayfield is particularly built to handle a situation like he's going to face in Lubbock. He loves the big stage. He loves the challenge aspect of it all. A lot of quarterbacks that have come through have been the Marlboro man that you sit there strong-jawed, don't say anything. Baker Mayfield revels in this kind of environment. So I think he's going to play well. He seems to have, in October, he's played much better than he did in September. I think he's going to continue to play well. The truth of the matter is, if any quarterback in America is not doing well, send them to Lubbock, Texas. They're going to get fixed right quick because this defense at Tech is terrible. So, the Sooners should light them up. Now, Tech may light up the Oklahoma defense. I'm not saying it's going to be a rout. I'm just saying I think Baker and the OU offense will excel on Saturday.
Just one more thing about Baker Mayfield, Barry. I mean, can you speak to his confidence level? Where does his confidence rank, or where does he rank in terms of confidence and in terms of quarterbacks that you've seen come through this OU program? He looks to be awfully high when it comes to confidence.
Well, I mean, confidence in many forms. I've seen the guys that are awfully confident. Sam Bradford was supremely confident and never said a word. But the thing about Baker is he harkens back a little bit to the wishbone quarterbacks. Barry Switzer had some sort of stylish quarterbacks back in the old days. Jamel Holloway was that way. J.C. Watts was fairly demonstrative. The Sooners have had some quarterbacks that were outwardly expressive with their play and with their emotions on the field. So we hadn't seen a lot of that in the Bob Stoops era when you're talking about Josh Heupel and Jason White and Sam Bradford and Landry Jones. But Baker's different, and it's sort of fun to see a different type of personality in there at quarterback.
Hey, Barry, you mentioned the defense and how OU's defense could have some problems against this Tech offense. Brooke, what are you expecting from that side of the ball when it comes to Tech having the ball and OU having to stop them?
I think we've seen earlier in the season that OU really struggled to stop the deep ball, stop those back shoulder passes that Ryan Aber wrote about a couple of weeks ago. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that this week, not so much in the run game, but they're not going to use the run game as much. They're going to go for that deep ball, or they're going to do the screen passes and some short routes. Jordan Thomas has been tested a lot in the last couple of weeks, and I expect him to be tested again, but I also expect Jordan Parker, the true freshman cornerback, to have some throws his way into this could be his toughest challenge so far.
Barry, are you seeing a turnaround from this OU defense a little bit? They still got a ton of injuries that they're dealing with, but has the last week or two given you any more confidence that this OU defense is starting to turn the corner?
You know what? I actually am. I'm not as down on the OU defense as most people are. I thought they actually played pretty good against Houston. I thought they got roughed up against Ohio State. But when you look at TCU and Texas games, they played big chunks of those games really well. And then they had moments, stretches, where just bang, bang, 2 big touchdowns, and all of a sudden that's a bad game. But they've shown that they can do it for extended periods of time. So I'm reasonably confident in the Oklahoma defense that's going to continue to get better, and you're not going to see these 40-point performances by opposing offenses.
Let's switch gears a little bit. And you're watching Football Friday with Barry Trammell, Brooke Pryor, Kyle Fredrickson. I'm your host, Darnell Mayberry. Let's talk a little OSU Kansas. Kyle will bring you in. Just what about this game at Kansas are you looking forward to? You mentioned and you've written about the environment up there. What are we to expect from OSU Kansas tomorrow?
Well, the storylines for every team playing Kansas this year are the same. You can't overlook these guys, even though they've been struggling. And that's been the case for the past couple seasons. But for OSU, you don't got to remind these guys of what it's like to go play in Lawrence. The past 2 times the Cowboys have gone, they've only won by a touchdown or less. If you guys remember in 2014, Tyreek Hill had to have a late return touchdown for the win. In 2012, there was a 14-point surge by the Jayhawks late that cut that game to a touchdown. So these games have always been close, and it's just a weird environment. It's a little bit quiet there. You only have about 26,000 fans in the stands. The Cowboys still practiced with music this week to sort of keep the routine the same, to try to emulate that game environment. But that's just not what it's going to look like in Lawrence. So it's a weird kind of environment. We saw what happened with TCU when they traveled there, escaping with the 1-point victory. So although OSU is favored heavily and should be, we could see some wackiness happen on Saturday. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised.
Barry, Kyle just mentioned it. Kansas did give TCU a scare. Do the Cowboys have anything to worry about tomorrow?
Yes, I think they do. I mean, 2 straight trips, and they've struggled to beat terrible teams. And this is a program OSU's dominated. Kansas has beaten Oklahoma State once since 1994, and that was with the great Orange Bowl team of 07. But Cowboys own, and for whatever reason, the last 2 times they've gone to Kansas, they have not really been prepared to compete and have just gotten out, barely alive. So I think Kansas is getting incrementally better. We saw them go to Tech and play with Texas Tech for most of 3 quarters. We saw them take TCU to the wire. They have trouble scoring. Cowboys ought to light them up, but that doesn't mean they will. They got to do it. So last time we saw OSU, they were messing around with Iowa State in Stillwater. If you mess around with Iowa State in Stillwater, you can mess around with Kansas in Lawrence.
And Kyle, Barry just mentioned it. I mean, not only the Iowa State game, but also the Central Michigan game. Everyone thought that was going to be pretty much a victory for Oklahoma State, and they end up losing. Controversial loss, albeit a loss. And is there concern on your part, at least, for Oklahoma State heading into this matchup?
Yeah, the good news is it comes after the bye week. A lot of guys nursing injuries this week. We're going to see Chris Carson come back to the OSU backfield, should give them some depth. A lot of dinged-up linebackers, including Jordan Burton, are going to be playing. Jordan Stearns, who sat out against Iowa State with a hip injury, he's back. So the excuses aren't really there, I think, for that type of letdown. Like Barry said, it's been a long time since the Jayhawks got the best of OSU. But with the way Mason Rudolph is playing, the limited number of interceptions, if OSU wins the turnover battle, I think in the second half I'll have a chance to look out on the beautiful scenery of Lawrence, Kansas. I hope the leaves are changing. The press box has a nice view.
Kyle, you mentioned Chris Carson coming back. Came into the season, we didn't know who was going to be the featured running back. Justice Hill has sort of taken that by the horns and run with it, literally. So what do we expect now with Chris Carson coming back into the picture at running back?
I think at this point, just quality depth, because through these games that we've seen him not in that running backs lineup, there hasn't been a time where we said, oh, wow, OSU really misses Chris Carson right now. And, in terms of an indictment of him, that's partly due to the situation the Cowboys were in with the number of backs they were using. But like you said, Justice Hill has become the guy. He's strung together 2 100-yard games. Prior to that Iowa State game, he only rushed for 57. We'll see how he responds this week, but everything we've seen from him points us in the direction that he's going to be their featured guy for possibly a long, long time if he continues on this upswing. And in Carson's case, he's a senior. He only has half of a season left. If he needed any more motivation to play like a starter, at least he's got that going for him in what's going to be his final game to Stillwater.
Barry, the score aside, I mean, we anticipate OSU winning the game, even if it could be a little troublesome. What would be a successful trip for OSU to Lawrence tomorrow?
I think when you go to a place like Kansas, you want to do more than just win. You want to continue to run the ball well. They've run it much better here in recent weeks. You want Mason Rudolph to remain sharp. He's had a really good year. Has been taking care of the ball better the last few weeks. So you want that to continue. On defense, don't give up those big plays that really hurt OSU earlier. Kansas really isn't capable of stretching you, of threatening you. So this is a team you ought to dominate. The OSU defense ought to dominate. If Cowboys return to Stillwater without having dominated that Kansas offense, that's a little bit of an unfortunate sign.
Yeah. Kyle, you mentioned David Betty. Jenny wrote about him in her column, and he's sort of become a lovable loser with this Kansas program, trying to return it to some sort of level of prominence. Is it hard not to root for a guy like this when he runs a program like he's running it so far?
Yeah, I mean, he entered a situation at Kansas that I don't think anyone envied in terms of the talent they had on the roster and the sort of recruiting base they have at the moment. It's been a long time since that Orange Bowl season that Barry had referenced earlier. And with Beatty in charge, it's not like they've made some sort of, leaps and bounds to get back atop the conference. But he goes out and does stuff like Jenny's going to write in her column, saves a kid from the canvas that's ripped in a bouncy house and practically saves the kid's life. Those are just kind of small examples of who this guy is. And as we write about this game and think about this game, being that the game itself might not be overly exciting if OSU takes care of business, it's stories like Beatty that I think make college football great. And certainly when we talk about the Baylors of the world and some of the controversy going on in the Big 12, that's somewhere that I think fans can point to and say, hey, we got guys doing things the right way. We'll see if Kansas can improve over these next couple seasons. I know that Beatty is a strong recruiting base in Texas from his days as an assistant coach out of Texas A&M. If he can get some of those same guys the Cowboys are in on, I don't think there's any reason in the next few seasons we could see even more progress.
Barry, what should OSU fans know about David Beatty going into tomorrow's game? And do you have any good David Beatty stories?
Well, you know that his David Beatty's father was on the police detail during the Kennedy assassination in Dallas. In fact, he's in the photo, if I'm not mistaken, of when Jack Ruby Jack Ruby shot and killed Lee Harvey Oswald. So, I mean, I don't know what that means about Saturday's game in Lawrence, but it's dang interesting.
It is interesting.
It's more interesting than the cover 2 defense, I promise you that. So, David Beatty's got a very difficult task. Kansas seems to have become destitute in football. Kansas and Iowa State and people like that have always faced uphill battles. But look at Iowa State, and they haven't won much, but they remain competitive. The fans have stayed with them. You go to and the crowds are great, and there's an energy and excitement in the air. And the Cyclones play hard. They took OSU to the wire. They took Baylor to the wire. Even when they're not winning, there's a good, solid football team that you got to. It's not that way at Kansas. I mean, it's just a mess. It's depressing. It's an afterthought. It's a place where just counting down the days to basketball season. And I don't, somebody can go in there. We've seen Mark Mangino do it. We saw Glenn Mason do it in the 90s. We saw Pepper Rogers do it in the 60s, for crying out loud. But if you're gonna win at Kansas, it takes a lot of long, hard, laborious work.
Do you think that it could ever happen, Barry? I mean, how long until you think that something like that could happen, a real major turnaround?
Well, I mean, it could happen at any time, but it's not gonna be rags to riches. It's gonna be slow, incremental. Bill Snyder turned around Kansas State, who was, look at what Kansas has been doing the last 7 years. Kansas State did that 30 years. Bill Snyder turned it around within 3 or 4 years into the competitive, and then 3 or 4 years after that really good, and then a couple years after that championship. But it takes time, and the problem you have is you don't know necessarily when you're making progress, or the rest of us don't know when Kansas might be making progress. And sometimes a lot of good coaches have been fired. Here's a story that I never forget is, Bill McCartney at Colorado. His first 3 years at Colorado, the Buffaloes were just terrible, including a 1-10 season. but somebody at Colorado stuck with Bill McCartney and said, you know what? Whatever this guy's doing, he's doing it right. I like what I'm 100 years. And by year 4, Colorado was pretty good. By year 6 or 7, they were national contenders. So if you believe in your guy, you got to stick with him. And not every administrator does that. Kansas historically, not football administration. We'll see how they do with David Beatty. You just don't know.
He certainly got his hands full. We'll have to watch and see how that plays out. Let's turn our attention back to OU football and bring back in Brooke Pryor. Brooke, some unfortunate injury news for the Sooners last week with Samaje Perine going down. What can you tell us about his status going forward, and how are the Sooners going to overcome the loss of Samaje Perine for at least the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so he's got a slight muscle pull that's going to keep him out 2 to 3 weeks. The good news for the Sooners is that this is not a super difficult stretch of the season, at least as compared to the first 5 games of the season, or how it's going to inspire West Virginia and Oklahoma State. The bad news is that this really cuts down on the number of scholarship running backs they had available. They already had Rodney Anderson go down with a neck injury before the season. They had Daniel Brooks have to retire because of concussions. So now they've got Abdul Adams is healthy and Joe Mixon is healthy. And that's it. That's their running back rotation. So that's a lot of the weight there is going to fall on Joe Mixon to pick up that slack with Samaje out. Shooting in the spotlight, but he's not the same kind of back like Samaje where he could just, take pounding after pounding after pounding and be okay. So it will be interesting to see how they kind of adjust to that and how Abdul Adams has worked into that rotation. Stoops also said there's a possibility that Dimitri Flowers, the fullback, could be moved over and help out in that rotation as well. So it's going to take a little mixing and matching and patchwork running back rotation there, but they should be okay.
Barry, I don't think Lincoln Riley needs any extra added or motivation or incentive to throw the ball.
No, and this is a game where, all of us, most of us, are always on Lincoln. Hey, run the ball. But, relieving the pressure on Mixon at this time, I think, is important. Stoops already pulled him off punt returns. I don't think he's going to return kickoffs on Saturday. So I think you need to see a lightening of the load on Joe Mixon. I can see the Baker Mayfield throwing a ton of passes. I can see if the game gets away, Austin Kendall coming in, throwing a bunch of short passes. I think that's what they got to do. I would like to see Dimitri Flowers carry the ball some, but you don't want to wear him out. It's not like he's sent down over on the bench. He's playing fullback. So you always got receivers you can throw to. I think you'll see a bunch of passes in the air Saturday night.
Guys, Samaje Perine was so close to this OU rushing record. I believe it was about 500 some odd yards away from it, if I'm not mistaken. How does this injury now impact him in terms of trying to secure that rushing record?
I think he'd have to have a lot of monster games between when he comes back and the end of the season if he's going to try to capture it this year. I want to say he has to average over 150 rushing yards a game. I'm not positive on that number. And he has shown recently, he had over a 200-yard rushing game a couple weeks ago. So it's possible, not going to rule anything out, but I think he was counting on, at least fans were counting on him really racking up the yards against Kansas. And now it's very unlikely that he plays in that game. So that's going to take away a big opportunity for him to pick up those yards and break that record.
Barry, I believe you're bouncing in and out of the prediction business. But if you had to guess, do you think Samaje Perine gets the record?
Not this year, I don't. No. I think Tobacco Road is right. I did the numbers earlier, and if he misses 3 games, then that'll leave him with 3 plus a bowl game. He would need to be in the 148, 149, 150 yard range. That's going to be tough considering you're playing some pretty good teams down the stretch. Not Texas Tech and Kansas. He's going to miss the 2 teams that he's completely torn up. He's rushed for 517 yards in 2 games against Kansas, 415 or something yards in 2 games against Tech. He's missing the buffet, and that's too bad. He might break the record if he just got to play these 2 games and not the rest. But I think he's going to have to come back for his senior year if he wants to break that record.
Brooke, one thing that you've written about is the defense and getting interceptions and turnovers. What are the chances we see the defense score a touchdown tomorrow against Texas Tech?
I'm making that my bold prediction of the game is that they are going to get that first defensive touchdown just because Pat Mahomes has shown he's thrown some interceptions. He's thrown a pick six this year. And because OU's pass rush is playing so much better, the secondary is being a lot more aggressive. They're jumping the short routes. I think that puts them in a position to jump in there, grab an interception, and then hopefully return it for a touchdown so they can finally, I mean, that's not bias. Not every team is going to score a defensive touchdown every year, but I think that that's something that they would like to do to feel like they've really turned this defense all the way around.
Barry, do you like her prediction, her bold prediction?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I sort of expect Sooners to play a. I think they're going to be happy. I think Stoops brothers will be happy when they return from Lubbock.
I'll ask you the same question about the Sooners that I did about the Cowboys. Aside from the score, the final score, and we anticipate them going down there and getting a win. I think you all predicted OU winning. What will be a successful trip to Lubbock?
I think a successful trip will be if Baker has a good showing, if he does the big game Baker stuff, and if the defense can hold Tech's offense. I think I have Tech scoring 36 points, but if they can hold them to less than that, if they can hold them to 20, 25 or under, I think that will be really successful because I think the offense isn't going to have a problem cutting up Tech's defense, but I think OU's defense really needs to show that they're capable of shutting down a deep pass threat. And last week, I mean, for West Virginia, it kept Tech to 17 points, I believe, and it was a pretty dismal performance. So it's possible to shut this team down, and I think the Sooners really need to do that.
Barry?
You want what's successful? I would say on offense, everybody comes back healthy. On defense, Mike Stoops only blows his gasket 3 times all night.
All right. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, guys. That's all for Football Friday. For the best college football coverage anywhere, stay right here at newsok.com and make sure to read us every day in the Oklahoman.